and I will let everybody in. And we have 120 people signed up. And I'll keep monitoring. Okay, welcome to our Lunch and Learn today, and I'll turn it over to our speaker, Dr. Matt Stanford.
Thanks, Peggy. Hello, I'm Matt Stanford. I'm the CEO of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute in Houston, Texas, if you're not in Houston, Texas. Hope and Healing Center is a mental health resource for the Houston community and beyond. We have a clinic that treats individuals with serious psychiatric illnesses, as well as educational programs like this one that we offer to the community. We also have a center called CARES, which serves individuals that are 65 and over with aging related issues. We have a support line called the Hope Line for people in the evening that need to talk to somebody and work through a problem. You can receive counseling on the phone and referral to mental health resources. And we have our Gateway to Hope program, which trains faith communities, schools, and workplaces to be front doors to the mental health care system and offer supportive services for those individuals that they encounter. And so today we're going to be talking about renewing your mind, common thinking traps, and false beliefs. And so, I think a lot of times people, we're all about our feelings these days. And so, people feel a certain way. They might feel down or depressed. They might think of themselves as sad or anxious, however they are. And, a lot of times we think, well, I need to change this mood. I need to change the way I feel. Or someone might say to you, if you're kind of down or if you're anxious, they might say, well, you just need to stop being sad, or you just need to stop worrying about that. And a lot of times it's it's easier said than done for us to just kind of flip a switch and change our emotions or our feelings. But what most people don't realize is that our emotions are really more often than not products of our thoughts. And so here's a little diagram here of this cognitive behavioral model. And certainly things can go in almost any direction here, but thoughts typically lead to emotions, and then emotions and thoughts result in our behaviors. And so if you think about it, when you're feeling down, you tend to be thinking very negatively or thinking down. And so it's the thoughts that we need to change. And those thoughts, when they're changed and when they're accurate, they will change our emotions, and our expression will be different. And a lot of times what we find is that, the thoughts that we have, whether a person's struggling with a mental health problem or not, just people in general, the thoughts you have may not be an accurate thought. It may not be a truthful thought. It may, in fact, be false. And just looking at that thought and kind of breaking it down will cause you to realize that it's a false thought. And we're going to talk about that today, about how you can actually kind of take your thoughts and kind of restructure them and to make sure that they're actually accurate. So we're going to talk about, so let's remember this. So thoughts lead to emotions. That's going to be the whole point of what we talk about today. So what I'm not talking about is positive thinking. I'm talking about healthy thinking. Healthy thinking is different than positive thinking. Positive thinking is when people tell you, oh, well, you just need to think positive, and so regardless of what's going on. I mean, as you can see in this little cartoon here, which I like when I use my presentations, I mean, the guy's just telling him, well, you just need to be positive, and so it's, he's got a, spear through him. Well, you just need, your problem is that you're just not positive enough. And the reality is that that's just not true. I mean, if bad things are happening, then you should probably be down. If you're in a difficult situation, it might be appropriate to have a depressed, not depression, but a depressed mood state. But how depressed of the mood state depends on kind of how you conceptualize what's going on. So, healthy thinking, as I've defined there, looking at the entire situation, the positive and negative, and having a very balanced view or a balanced conclusion and a balanced set of thoughts about that are realistic. It's not just positive thinking. It's not just telling somebody when things are bad, they need to think positive and that's going to make them happy, because that's just not true. So do remember as we go through, what I'm not telling you to do is to just kind of, if you're having a negative thought, just make it positive. I'm not saying that at all. Negative thoughts are perfectly normal. We just have to make sure that those negative thoughts are accurate. All right, so unhealthy thinking, that's where we're going to start. Unhealthy thinking oftentimes will develop in childhood. And really what it is that we develop kind of a set of kind of maladaptive approaches to thinking. And we're going to go through a whole set of them in a moment. And they're just kind of strategies or approaches to thinking about things that we kind of develop. They're really just bad habits. And in the extreme, they can be related to mental health problems. But all of us do deal with them. All of us have them. And there isn't a person that you've ever met or I've ever met that didn't struggle with unhealthy thinking at different times. And when we are under stress situations, we're more likely to kind of fall into these kind of negative shortcuts that we're going to talk about, where we just kind of, have a way that we just, a strategy, be it unconscious, that we will interpret events that are happening around us. And most often those are negative. And when we have that negative thinking, then our mood state is going to go down. We may worry, we may be anxious, even though the situation doesn't call for that. Okay. And so what we want to do today is we want to learn how to kind of move unhealthy thinking to healthy thinking, not negative thinking to positive thinking. You may may hear me refer to unhealthy thinking as negative thinking, which it is, but healthy thinking is not necessarily positive thinking. You can have healthy thinking and be thinking about negative things and have negative experiences, and it still can be healthy. All right, so the thing we're going to focus on the most today is what are referred to as thinking traps and distortions. Okay, and so these are patterns that we learn throughout our life. A lot of times you will learn them from your parents or your peers. You kind of model them. One of the things you need to think about as we go through today is if you do have children, you need to think about the fact that, what are your thinking traps and distortions that you kind of fall into, because what you find is that those are things that you are kind of modeling for your children, and you oftentimes will find that your children will also use those same kind of negative or kind of maladaptive approaches to thinking about themselves and others. These are sometimes referred to, I like the term thinking traps, but they also refer to as cognitive distortions. That sounds a little more pathological and, almost like a delusion. That's why I like the term thinking traps a little bit better. You're gonna, as we go through these thinking traps, I want to just tell you that you're gonna see yourself here, and that's really the first aspect of learning how to change this, is recognizing what you do in times that are negative or difficult. How do you think about these situations? All right, so let's go through and just kind of start breaking some of these down. Okay, now I'm not saying that everybody does all of these. Some of these you may have never even heard of or experienced, but you do have a tendency to have kind of unconsciously your favorite one. Okay, and I know my favorite one is on here, and so we all have to keep ourselves from falling into this. And so the first thinking trap is all or none thinking. It looks at things in absolutes, black and white categories. There's no continuum or spectrum. They see small mistakes as total failures. So let's imagine, for instance, that I'm doing this presentation here, and as I'm talking here, I look down and I see that I misspelled a word. Okay, one of the words on here is misspelled. Now, that would bother me. That would bother most people, that I misspelled a word. Now, if I then internalize that through an all or none thinking lens, that I am now, I'm a failure as the CEO of the Hope and Healing Center. I'm a failure as a presenter. I'm a failure as a mental health care provider. I don't know what I'm talking about. You see, I really shouldn't be doing these types of things because I can't be successful at this. I'm just not good at what I do, and I need to probably step out of that, or allow that to just kind of crush me to the point that it alters the way that I behave throughout the day and how I interact with others. That's all or none thinking. I mean, a typo is a typo. It happens. Okay. It is not a reflection of whether I am good at my job or not. I mean, and so, that thinking about things in those kind of terms, I either am successful or I'm absolutely a complete failure. Well, I think there's a lot of areas between that. And so all or none thinking. So when you have a negative experience, or you have something that occurs, whether you see it as negative or not, thinking about that event in an all or none way will lead to that kind of unhealthy type of thinking. Because think about yourself when you think about things. When you have what you would think of as a negative thought, it's very difficult to move beyond a negative thought. It's much more difficult than it is to move beyond a positive thought. Positive thoughts are great, but they kind of seem to be fleeting a lot of times for most people because we don't kind of ruminate on them. But we ruminate on unhealthy thoughts, on negative thinking. We ruminate on that, and we're not able to move beyond it. And that's because of these thinking traps. So all or none thinking is one trap. Another one is overgeneralization, thinking that a negative situation is part of a constant cycle of bad things that happen. So these are like, you will hear these people, as I have here, they will use terms like always and never. I always mess up when I make a presentation. I am never able to get through a presentation without making a mistake. I always do poorly in math class. I never am able to, I'm never able to do whatever it is. The way you're constantly thinking about always and never, these extremes, you overgeneralize to everything. So you may have messed up in one situation, or you may have considered yourself to not be successful in one situation. And now you overgeneralize that to everything, which then kind of impacts your ability to perform in those other areas. I'm never able to make friends. I'm always left out of everything. So always and everything, and the reality is that is unlikely to be true. Okay. And so, but it's an overgeneralization. Now, again, back to this idea that people don't tend to do all of these. You don't tend to, you wouldn't see somebody that's doing all or none thinking and overgeneralization all necessarily at the same moment. You may have a few of these that you kind of fall into, but you tend to do them kind of singularly. So all or none thinking, overgeneralization, and the mental filter, focusing only on the negative parts of the situation, ignoring anything positive or good. So back to the typo in a presentation. So, you do a presentation, you got a typo in one of your, maybe you have 50 slides, you have a typo on one slide, and, people come up to you afterwards and they tell you, hey, that was a really good presentation. I really enjoyed that. I learned a lot. But you absolutely cannot move beyond the fact that you had a typo. So the only thing you think about is the typo. The presentation was a complete failure. I don't know what these people are talking about. There was a typo on slide 5. And so everything is filtered through that negative moment, that negative event. Nothing good ever happens. Nothing positive ever happens for you. Everything is filtered through that. So the presentation was an absolute failure because of this one singular event. And in that situation, that's a good example of a mental filter. And I do see people do that a lot of times. It's, they're not able to look at the whole. So let's think about a balanced or healthy approach to thinking there. Was there a typo on slide 5? Yeah, there was a typo on slide 5. Did you receive positive feedback for your presentation? Yeah, a lot of people came up and said it was a really good presentation. They enjoyed it. They learned a lot. Okay, well, What was there a negative aspect? Yes. Were there positive aspects? Yes. So there are positive and negative aspects. So that's what we're going to talk about, how we go through and kind of restructure these thinking. There's 3 different aspects there. Now a few more. Fortune telling. This is one I see a lot. This is very common. Predicting that things will turn out badly without any evidence. Okay, so I'm going to fail that test tomorrow. Well, have you studied for it? Yeah, I've been studying for 3 weeks. Did you study the way you always study? Yes. Have you failed your other tests? Yeah. No, I passed them, but I just know I'm going to fail it. Well, why do you think you're going to fail it? I don't know. I just know I'm going to fail it. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail. So you're predicting things are going to turn out badly without any evidence. And so, for instance, I saw my friend in the hallway, and when he walked by, he didn't even say hi to me. He must be mad at me. I'm sure I did something that made him mad at me. I wonder what it was. I wonder what I did that made. Should I call him? No, he's mad at me. I can't. I hope he calls me and tells me what I did wrong. Okay, well, I'm fortune telling here. I have absolutely no evidence that he's mad at me, other than when he walked by me in the hallway, he didn't say hello, but I don't know that he just didn't even notice I was there. So I see this one probably more than I see most. This idea of kind of predicting things will turn out badly without any evidence. I think a lot of times it's a little of a defense mechanism, in the sense that you kind of set yourself up to say, well, I know this is going to be bad, so just in case it turns out bad, somehow that's going to make things better. But what it actually does is, let's imagine for a minute that I did what I just said. I saw someone in the hallway that didn't say hi to me. Now I'm convinced that person's mad at me. Well, that's going to make my mood down. That's going to probably alter the way I interact with them. That's going to maybe affect the way I interact with others, which is ultimately, it's just this kind of vicious cycle that builds on top of itself, when there's absolutely no evidence that that person is mad at me. And even if the person were mad at me, wouldn't it be better to take care of that situation than to just ruminate on that kind of unhealthy thought? So fortune telling, I have to say, I see more than most of these in people. Emotional reasoning, assuming that one's negative feelings necessarily reflect the way things really are. So you're down, you feel down. And so what you do is, because you feel down, everything is negative. And so this is the kind of person that, is driven solely by their emotional experience. They do not take kind of, in a sense, kind of cognitive reality into account. So I feel down, that must mean everything is bad right now. My life is bad. My relationships are bad. Everything is bad. I'm doing a bad job at work. Or maybe I feel anxious. And so that means that there's a lot of things to be fearful of, or there's a lot of danger in the world. And I need, and that's going to just kind of shape everything that I do. So you see this a lot of times with more younger individuals, because they kind of have difficulty kind of separating their cognitive life from their emotional life. And so emotional reasoning, something negative, I feel negative, so that means everything is negative. Labeling, or what's also called name calling, saying or thinking like negative things about yourself or others. This is another classic one that it's seen quite often. The individual pretty much just kind of self-deprecates constantly, and or does that towards others as well. So I'm no good, I'm a horrible presenter, I'm not a good husband, I'm a bad father. They constantly are using those. So anything that occurs, the individual, so maybe my maybe my teenage son comes home and he just kind of slams the door to the garage, and he kind of just runs upstairs. He doesn't say hello to me. Oh, I'm a horrible father. I've done something wrong. I've upset him. He's upset. I knew I was a bad father. I'm just a bad father. I know I did this other thing one time, and that, overall, I'm just a bad father. So it's kind of this, you're constantly focusing back on yourself in a very negative way, or you can do that towards others. Like, these people that I go to this group with, they are just so whiny and they really bother me, and they're so clingy. And you're constantly kind of just labeling or name calling things in a very negative way. And then that, again, affects your feelings or your emotions. So think about the ones that we've thought about or talked about so far. If, all of these kind of obviously have a very negative bend to them, what types of emotional experiences would you expect to be having if you are kind of caught in this kind of thinking trap, and that's how you're perceiving things? Your emotional state is going to be depressed, and you're going to be very down. And that's what, that's the epitome of unhealthy thinking. Should statements, telling yourself that you should or others should or must act in a certain way. This works two ways. One would be, I should have been able to stop that from happening at work. That means I'm a bad boss. I should have realized that, this was going on with my wife, and that makes me a bad husband. I must be able to earn a living at this level. If I can't do that, then that demonstrates that I'm just a poor provider. So you set up these kind of unrealistic boundaries for yourself, whether these things are true or not. In most instances, they are not true. And you do that, or you can do this for others. They should have been able to fix this before it happened. Whether that's true or not. In most instances, it's not true. But you set that up in a situation, and that if so, imagine if I'm looking at an employee and I set up some unrealistic should for them. They should have been able to realize that, I don't know, their office mate was stealing from the till, when it would have been really impossible for them to do that. But I believe that they should have been able to do that, which then is going to generate kind of angry feelings in me, and and have a negative context towards them. And so again, that's unhealthy thinking. The whole point of, or the whole kind of description of unhealthy thinking is it is emotionally unhealthy for you, but it's also false. It's wrong. It's not accurate. Okay. Again, negative thinking can be healthy. Positive thinking can be healthy, but they're accurate. Okay. And so should statements. Mind reading. Okay. So concluding what others are thinking without any evidence and making no effort to check it out. So this goes very close to fortune telling. And I kind of gave a little bit of an example of this earlier, the idea that I mind read my friend that he's angry with me, and so and so I'm mind reading into him. And then a lot of times what that'll do is that'll lead to fortune telling, because I'm assuming that I know what he's thinking, and then I'll fortune tell the event that's going to happen as a result of that. So mind reading is extremely common. This is where what we would call it more often than not is we would call it jumping to conclusions. Okay. And so, you come home and your wife says something to you, and you just assume that you know what she's thinking. You take it the wrong way, or you only got a little bit of the information, and so you believe now that she is going to leave you because of something that she said, and you're convinced of that, and you begin to go down that road emotionally, and even go down that road kind of intellectually. Well, what am I going to do when she leaves? Well, maybe I need to go get a lawyer. I mean, and I know that you might be saying, well, that seems kind of extreme. Well, that's the whole point here. I mean, these things do kind of run down a long rabbit trail of being very extreme. If you were able to analyze the situation more honestly and truthfully, you won't run down that. And so I have seen people mind read themselves all the way into a session with a therapist, because they're absolutely convinced that something was that they knew that what somebody else was thinking about them, or believed about them, or felt about them, based on nothing. And so it had so emotionally debilitated them that they almost weren't functional anymore. And so mind reading is very, very common. Personalization and blaming, believing that everything others do or say is your fault, or a direct personal reaction to you in some way. So you're at a party, and you see some people talking in the corner, and one of them kind of looks towards you, and then they kind of laugh. Well, I know that they're talking about me. I know they don't like me. And I can tell actually everybody, I think they were talking about me before I got here. That's why everybody is kind of avoiding me. And so you start to kind of, everything that happens in a negative way is your fault, or somehow related to you. Or when people do certain things, it's a personal reaction to you, in some way. So, hey, you know what? My coworker, he did not park where he normally parks. He always parks, like 3 spaces down from me. And then we usually walk in because we get here at the same time. And the last 2 days, he has not parked there. I think that he may be mad at me. You may say to yourself, well, that's, no one would think like that. Don't people think like that all the time? Okay. And so he may be mad at me. I think that's why he didn't park there. I bet he's parking somewhere else to stay away from me. Well, I don't know where he's parking, and I don't know why he's parking. Maybe he didn't even drive to work today. But you're not interested in that. You're only interested in how that's negatively related to you in some way. So again, all of these are obviously unhealthy. I don't think anybody would say, when they're described this way, anyone would say it's unhealthy. Now, when you're trapped in it and you're using it, you will argue with an individual who says, so for instance, with mind reading, if you were to say, look, you don't know what that person's thinking. Just because they walk by, just because they walk by you in the hall doesn't mean that no, I know they're mad at me. I know they are. And you can just it'll even come up with kind of false evidence to the contrary. So, these things can really get you hung. So let's talk about, I actually forgot to tell you what my favorite one is. My favorite one is called catastrophizing. I don't have that on here. Catastrophizing is my favorite one. And that means that when some minor thing goes wrong, you convince yourself in your mind that it is going to result in some major catastrophe. So in that instance, it might be something like, there was a typo on my 5th slide in a presentation I had to make to the board of directors. And that's it. I know when I go in tomorrow, they're going to fire me. I know they're going to fire me. And what am I going to do when they fire me? I'm not going to be able to support my family. I mean, I don't have any skills. I mean, I'm not, I can't get another job. What am I going to? Well, this is it. I mean, I'm not going to be able to support my family. My kids aren't going to be, able to go to college anymore. I mean, that's catastrophizing. So understand where the genesis of that was. I had a typo on a slide, and now my children aren't going to be able to go to college. So that I see that one quite a bit. And so someone will come in and they will say, I'm really upset. I'm afraid I'm not, going to be able to get my children through college. Well, really, what started this concern? Have you lost your job, or what's going to in financial issues? Well, I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and to the board of directors, and there was a typo in one of my slides, and literally, I have had that not exactly about a typo, but a conversation of that extreme kind of scenario, like this trivial negative experience associated with absolute familial catastrophe. And the person adamantly believes that link to be accurate. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to talk about, how do you challenge this unhealthy thinking? How can you change it? Okay. Now, this is not, we're going to go through this and we're going to do a couple exercises. This is not something that you can do, you do it one time and you don't have any more problems. Okay. This is something that you have to do regularly so that you can move yourself beyond a thinking trap. So we're not just talking about, we're talking about people who fall into thinking traps. Okay, so you try to figure out what thinking trap you fall into, and then it's easier, I should say, to kind of work your way out of that over time. So how do you challenge unhealthy thinking? Well, number one, you examine the evidence. That is something that people that are using thinking traps or falling into thinking traps don't do. So you try to find evidence against your thoughts. You typically don't check the facts. Okay, so if, let's go back to the gentleman that passed me in the hallway and he didn't say hi like he normally does. And so I'm convinced that he's mad at me. Okay. All right. So he's mad at me, I think. So, all right, well, what if I did this? What if I'm going to examine the evidence? Do I have any evidence that he is mad at me? Have we had any other interactions? Okay, well, he sent me an email about an hour after I saw him in the hallway, and he wanted to know, he asked me a couple of questions about what's going on, and he said, hey, I hope you have a good day, at the end of the email. Okay, so well, there's actually some evidence to the contrary that he's mad at me. Okay, so can I find evidence to the contrary? Okay, the second thing would be a double standard. Okay, you want to ask yourself about a double standard. If your thoughts are self-critical, you have to ask yourself, would I say this to a close friend who had a similar problem, or am I being harder on myself than I would be on others? Okay, so with the typo on the slide. Okay, let's say that my coworker had done a presentation to the staff and he had a typo on slide 5 of 50. Okay, and would I go to him and would I say, you're going to lose your job now? That's it. I mean, I don't know that you'll ever be able to get another job. Would you say that to them? Well, no, I'd never say that to them. Well, why would you say that to yourself? You know, so are you holding yourself to a different standard than you would hold another individual? And so that's another way of kind of challenging or testing this unhealthy thinking. A survey, find out whether other people you trust agree with your thoughts. Okay, well, you can go and, do a survey. So go and ask people, hey, have you ever had a typo when you did a presentation here at work? Oh yeah, I've done that. Over the years, I've had a couple. Okay, well, there's evidence to the contrary through the survey. They're still employed there. Okay. Hey, have you seen, did you see John today? You know, I saw him in the hallway. He didn't say, hey, hi to me. I was wondering if he might be mad at me. No, he's really busy these days. He's got that big presentation coming up, and he said the same thing to me the other day. Okay, so again, we're gathering information from others to see what their thoughts are, or maybe even asking someone specifically, hey, this happened to me, and I'm concerned about this. What do you think about that? And getting their feedback. And then the last one would be conduct an experiment. Ask yourself if there's a way you can test your thoughts. Okay, so let's talk about the guy who didn't say hello to me, and now I'm convinced that he's mad at me. So I'm mind reading. Okay. Well, if this is somebody that I know, obviously, and somebody that I've had a good relationship with, what if I emailed them and I said, hey, you want to get some coffee this afternoon? Or something along those lines. And when this is an experiment I'm conducting. If he emails me back and he says, sure, what time you want to go? He's probably not mad at me the way I think he is. I was convinced that he was mad at me and he didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. He's probably not mad at me anymore, or not the way I think he is. And so, that would be a lot of times, particularly teenagers will say things like, so-and-so was mean to me. I have no friends. I just have absolutely no friends. So that's all or none thinking. I have no friends. Well, hey, why don't you text Luke and see what he's doing, see if he wants to come over this weekend? Well, no, there's no reason to do that because I have no friends. Well, Luke's your friend. Text him. Just show me that this will work out. So text him. You text him. He says, yeah, I'll come over this weekend. What do you want to do? Okay, well, that kind of demonstrates that your thinking was not accurate. So these are different ways to challenge or test unhealthy thinking. Okay, and so what we do is we kind of put it into this kind of a structure, and a lot of times I'll refer to this as renewing your thoughts, but a lot of times it's in a technical sense it's referred to as cognitive restructuring. But that kind of freaks people out. It sounds like somebody's getting in your head and kind of altering the way you think in maybe a negative way. But I like to just call this renewing your thoughts. Okay, so this is how this would work, and this is an actual the actual kind of handout that we use with individuals to kind of help them learn how to do this. So they'll make copies of this diagram, and then every time they have these kind of negative thoughts or unhealthy thoughts, I should say, in the context of these thinking traps, then they will actually go through and write this out. Now it's a little arduous and it takes some time, but once you do it a few times where you actually write it out, you then can kind of do it in your head, and it becomes pretty easy to challenge the thoughts. So there's a situation that occurs, positive or negative, some situation occurs. That situation leads to certain thoughts that you have, okay? Those thoughts lead to feelings. Then you ask yourself, how am I thinking about this situation? Have I fallen into a distortion or a thinking trap? Then I'm going to challenge that thinking. I'm going to use those challenge options that I just talked about. I'm going to examine the evidence, see if I'm using a double standard, survey. I'm going to conduct an experiment perhaps. So I'm going to challenge the thinking. So after I've challenged the thinking, what are my new thoughts now that I have kind of reformulated? I've renewed that thought. I've reformulated what I think about that thought. So what are my new thoughts about the situation? And what are my new feelings in relationship to those new thoughts? And so let's think about a situation here. So we can go use some of the examples that I've used before. So let's say that I do a presentation and I'm convinced that was a bad presentation. And so now I'm going to be fired. Okay. I'm sure when I go in tomorrow, I'll be fired. And when I'm fired, then that means my family is not going to be able, to be supported, and my children aren't going to go to college, and, I'm a failure. Okay. So what, write out the situation. I did a presentation and it didn't go well. However, it might not have gone well. And let's say it actually didn't go well. Okay, let's say that it truly was a negative experience. I did a presentation and it did not go well. It was not a good presentation. Okay, more than just a typo. Okay, what are my thoughts? Well, I just told you my thoughts. My thoughts are that I'm going to be fired. My thoughts are that because I'm going to be fired, I won't provide for my family. Because I can't provide for my family, we're going to lose our home and my children won't go to college. So I'm catastrophizing. Okay. Now, again, this really was a negative experience. It was a negative experience, and I'm doing that on purpose. So you can see here. So what are the feelings that I have in relationship to these thoughts? Okay. Well, I'm extremely fearful, and I'm very depressed or sad as a result of it. I'm fearful and my mood is very low. Okay. And I'm extremely, I got a lot of irritability as a result of that, because I believe I'm going to be fired, and I believe that I won't be able to provide for my family. We're going to lose our home, and my children will go to college. Now, these feelings are directly related to these thoughts. And what you find is, in the individual trapped in a thinking trap, they're not even thinking about this anymore. They're thinking, they're just focused on these kind of negative thoughts that they're having, these unhealthy thoughts, because that's where all the feelings come from. All right. And so now I need to ask myself, am I trapped in a thinking trap? Okay, well, what am I doing? In this situation, I have overgeneralized, okay, because it's a negative, lots of people have had negative presentations and weren't fired. Okay, I've had negative experiences and weren't fired. Okay, I've catastrophized. Okay, I've convinced myself that this absolute catastrophe. Let's say I was fired. Okay, does that mean I'll never be able to find another job? Does that mean we will lose our home and my children will go to college? Well, no, lots of people have lost their job, and you see what I'm saying? So I've catastrophized and I'm overgeneralized. So those are the things I'm doing right now. So once I tell myself and I recognize that I actually am doing that, a lot of times it's not enough to cause you to orient your thoughts, but it does begin the process. So if you can see, oh, I really am doing that. Okay. So now let's challenge the thinking. Okay, well, have I, let's go back to these, examine the evidence. Have I ever had a negative presentation or bad presentation before in the position I'm in? Probably have. Certainly they varied in their, how positive they were, might we say. I've done good ones and I've had bad ones. Okay. And so did I lose my job? No, I didn't. Am I holding myself to a double standard? Have I seen other presentations where people did poorly? Yeah, would I go to that person after that presentation and say to them, you're going to lose your job and you will never be able to support your family? Well, no, I'd never say that to anyone. Okay, well, why would I say that to myself? Okay, well, I could do a survey. Now, this could be a little bit painful, but I could ask other people that saw my presentation, hey, I know that was pretty bad. That did not go the way I wanted it to go. what do you think about that? How do you think that's going to affect me around here? It's doubtful that they're all just going to say, well, you're done, man. You're losing your house, and you're gonna, your kids will never go to college. And then, it's more difficult with this example to conduct an experiment. I think one of the ways you can conduct experiments, you might talk to whoever it is that would fire you, but you may not be in a position to do that. So once I've challenged the thinking and I have evidence that counters these thoughts that I'm having right now. So now I've had individuals say, yeah, that was bad. It wasn't the worst presentation I've ever seen, frankly. Jimmy did a way worse presentation about 3 months ago, and so, or someone says, yeah, it was okay. I don't think it's as bad as you said it was, or you think it is. And then, they say, oh, no, I don't think that's going to affect you in the long run. You just need to make sure that, next time you're a little bit better prepared or whatever. So I've got some evidence to the contrary here. So now what are my new thoughts and what are my new feelings? Okay, so my new thoughts would be, I need to be better prepared next time. And yeah, I might get a little ding here but I'm not going to lose my job. That's not a fireable, I've done a good job here. I've worked here for the last 10 years. I'm not going to get fired for one bad presentation. So I have these new thoughts. And what are my new feelings? I'm feeling more relaxed about it. I'm still feeling a little down because I did have this negative experience, but it's within reason. It's understandable, the level of kind of depressed mood that I have. I'm kind of sad about what happened, but I'm not as fearful or worried about future negative consequences. And so each time an individual who's struggling with these thinking traps, these kind of false beliefs, each time they have kind of a negative thought experience, they will sit down and go through this. And again, it's like I said, it's a little arduous at the beginning, but it does work. It absolutely works. And since most people tend to use the same one or two thinking traps over and over and over again, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly the way you think about things. And then you can also tie this into, say, coping strategies that you use. So, when you have unhealthy thinking, it has a tendency to make your mood become very negative or kind of fearful or depressed or things like that. So you then will have a tendency to try to deal with that stressful situation in some way through a coping strategy. And if you're trapped in a thinking trap, a lot of times you will adopt a negative coping strategy. So you'll eat to deal with the negative emotional experience, or you'll use alcohol or things like that. So isolate yourself, and that just leads to more negative things. So when in the process of trying to renew this type of thinking, a lot of times what you also have to examine how you deal with stressful situations from a coping perspective. Are you using positive coping strategies? All right. Well, just to kind of give you a few kind of here as we get towards the end, before I take some questions, and just to kind of give you a thought, if you ever need to talk to somebody about thinking traps or negative thoughts you're having or unhealthy thinking, you can always call our Hope Line. Our Hope Line is available 7 days a week in the evenings from 5 to 8. You can talk to a trained operator for half an hour and get counsel on the phone. It's a warm line as opposed to a hotline. It's just for people who are struggling with an issue, be that a mental health problem or just a life problem. You can call it back as many times as you like. It's not a crisis line. You don't call it when it's a life or death situation, but it's a support line just to talk to somebody, and we have trained operators there. They also can help you with mental health referrals if you're looking for a referral to a mental health care provider. And then also you can go to our websites. The mentalhealthgateway.org website is a training website. It also has a lot of resources for mental health issues. There's all kind of videos on different mental health problems. There's training there for faith communities. There's training for schools. There's all types of information there on mental health problems and how to get care. And then hhci.org is just our general website, and you can learn about our organization. You also can access our clinic there if you're looking for clinical services. So just in closing, just kind of go back to this, it's really, if you find yourself dealing with unhealthy thoughts, and again, more often than not, unhealthy thoughts are very negative. This is how you can renew or restructure that thinking, as opposed to someone just telling you, well, you just need to be positive, or you just need to be happy, or you feeling like, well, I have so many blessings in my life, I shouldn't feel so down. I'm just going to be joyful. I mean, that doesn't work. I mean, you've got to change your thoughts, and that will lead to changes in your feelings. And the way you change your thoughts is you think about the situations, the difficult situations, and the positive situations that you encounter from a balanced perspective. And so you have healthy thinking as opposed to unhealthy thinking. Well, all right. Well, we've got a few minutes here, and I'd like to see if anybody has any questions. Whoops, I don't know what happened to my thing there. So I'll just leave that up. So let's see if you've got questions, you can just type them in the chat, and I'll go through here. These are just some general ones to begin with. Yeah, the PowerPoint slides will be sent out to all registrants for the presentation in a day or so, along with the link to the video for this. Oh, Peggy already did that. So all right.
Matt, there's a question about our support services and whether, or the support line, and whether it's free or is it?
Yes, the support line is free, and all the services at the Hope and Healing Center are free, actually. Anybody recognize themselves in the thinking traps? Anybody see themselves in there? It can be kind of a little bit of a, I find it kind of fun when you realize kind of what you do to yourself. I think that it's not what I will say is that is not some kind of marker of pathology. I mean, what that is that's just really being human. We take these kind of shortcuts and we're trying to protect ourselves from being overly, something really terrible happening to us. And sometimes the way we try to protect ourselves is convince ourselves that something very terrible is going to happen to us. And that way it's not a surprise, but that's not a healthy way of doing it. Someone asked about how we were funded. Since everything's free, we raise money, and we are a nonprofit organization. And so we write a lot of grants, and we ask people for donations. And if you'd ever like to donate to the Hope and Healing Center, you can just go to hhci.org, and there's a place you can donate right there. All of our clinical services are free that we offer to the community as well. Most of the people that come to the clinic are unable to afford care. Oh yeah, somebody had a great comment. They said, I realized that what I see in others is actually a reflection of me. And that's actually that's a very good comment, because that's exactly right. Some of the scenarios that I've gone through and some of the things that I've seen as I work with people is, people will come in and they will be in horrible conflict with another individual. And that entire conflict is based on a thinking trap, and they don't even realize it. There's absolutely no reason that they should even be in the conflict, but they're absolutely convinced that there's a horrible conflict going on.
Somebody else commented that these thinking patterns tend to come out in me when I'm arguing with my husband.
Yeah. Someone said they want to know, how common is it for someone to be stuck in a positive thinking trap, unrealistically optimistic? Yeah, well, number one, I would say this. All thinking traps are unhealthy. So I know that you didn't use the term positive there in a good light, but I just want to make sure that I say that they're all unhealthy. And so you absolutely could have a, I don't see that very often. You could have really what you find is when people are unrealistically optimistic, they don't really believe that things are as positive as they like to say. They just believe that if they don't say things are positive like that, that others are going to respond to them in a negative way. So what they tend to be doing is they tend to be, we can say back here, they tend to be mind reading, or they tend to be overgeneralizing the way that others are thinking about the situation. So they think, well, everyone believes that this is what's going on is very positive, so I need to be positive. And so what you find is that they are outwardly very positive, but inwardly their feelings and the thoughts they have are extremely unhealthy and negative. So yes, unrealistic optimism could be just as much of a kind of unhealthy approach. In reviewing your thoughts, are you thinking in terms of days or minutes? That's a great question. I would say each thought that you review, it's only going to take you probably a few minutes to an hour or so to actually do that. But to actually change and move away from a kind of a habitual thinking trap, you're really looking at kind of weeks to months of doing this on a daily basis. But I will promise you, it works. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Somebody said that it happened to them this morning, and she's a psychotherapist. And so, yeah, absolutely, it happens to me all the time. So, yeah, it's, we're lazy. Okay. When it comes to our thoughts and our emotions, we're very lazy. Particularly when it comes to the thoughts and emotions of others as well. We like to jump to conclusions. We like to take shortcuts on how we interpret them, and that gets us in a lot of trouble. And part of that is just this kind of very kind of dog eat dog, very fast-paced world we live in. We just don't take the time to kind of analyze our thoughts and the feelings that come from that, and then take the time to determine whether it's healthy or unthinking. Are there any disorders that would possibly prevent one from using this tool? Yes, if someone had a kind of a thought disorder where they have kind of a disconnection from reality, that would be a real problem. So you also have to understand that they wouldn't be able to use this as long as they were in that kind of psychotic phase. You also have to understand that somebody, for instance, that had a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder, somebody who has crossed the line into disorder, they will struggle more with this than somebody who does not have a clinical significant disorder. It's going to be harder for them, but we use this with them. This is helpful for them to actually to begin to change their thoughts. So it's just in those instances, just a matter of degree of difficulty. But someone with a thought disorder who doesn't have full kind of contact with reality, it's not possible for them to think of, since they in a sense live in a different reality than you and I do, what they think and they believe is true in that reality. And so it's not possible for them to look at evidence that's contrary, because in their reality, what they believe and they feel and they think is true. Let's see here. I think shortcuts. Yes, I think cognitive shortcuts. I've heard that term as well. All right. Anything else? Let's see.
There's one, I think emotional reasoning and mind reading seem to be my ones to work with. I love calling them shortcuts.
Yeah. Yeah, shortcuts is good. That's that's what it is. I mean, unless you're struggling with a mental health problem yourself, and we all do these, it's a shortcut. It's lazy is really the best. It's lazy thinking, and it's lazy kind of emotional interpretation. Well, all right. If there aren't any more questions, I do know that there will be an email that goes out to all registrants that will include the PowerPoint slides. Someone asked, how would you encourage a friend or family member to go through this? That is a great question. Okay, that is really, to taste that kind of may be the question of the day, because that's what people really. It's never about us. It's always about somebody else, and getting them to do that. So what I would say is, when you get these PowerPoint slides, if you have a loved one who falls into this. The best way to get somebody else to be involved in this kind of thing is to show them how you've done it, how you've been involved in it, so that they don't feel like what you're trying to do is say, oh, well, there's something wrong with you and there's nothing wrong with me. And if you would just fix yourself. So, maybe, sitting down with them and saying, hey, I listened to this presentation about these thinking traps, and I realized that this is the thinking trap that I fall into. And I did this just the other day and XYZ. And then, this little printout here, this is how I kind of wrote, it had, maybe you've gone through and you've written out how you kind of renewed a thought that you had that was unhealthy. And then you might ask them if they see themselves in any of those thinking traps. And if they say, no, I don't see myself, say, hey, what about that time that, again, then it's just a conversation between two people that fall into thinking traps, as opposed to, hey, you really need to get yourself right because you got a lot of unhealthy thinking. It's kind of making me nuts, that kind of a thing. So I think that kind of back and forth where it's just showing them that you've done it and you found it beneficial, and they might find it beneficial as well. All right, so email's going to go out, PowerPoint slides, and a link to the URL. It also will have a very brief 3-item survey on it. And if you could fill that out, that would be very beneficial to us for future programming. And I thank you guys for joining us today. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.